Welcome to The Growth Shift, the podcast where we unlock the psychological and strategic blueprints of predictable growth. If you've built a successful business, you know the truth. Your expertise is high value, but your time is finite. The question is, how do you sustain that success without sacrificing your most valuable asset? We believe that the next level of success requires a strategic pivot, a fundamental shift that moves beyond the old ways. In every episode, we dive into the critical turning points of industry leaders and uncover how they're leveraging AI not as a shortcut, but as the strategic force for their next growth shift. Today, we dive in with a leader who is defining the future of their industry. This episode is brought to you by Valentix, your strategic growth partner. At Valentix, we believe that trust and authentic relationships are the only true currency in high-value business. We challenge the status quo by building an AI-powered client acquisition engine that enhances your human connection, helping you move beyond the slow growth of referrals. Our AI-powered systems eliminate the grind, allowing you to break through the noise, automate tasks, and free up your time to focus on transformative client impact. If you're ready to build a predictable growth engine, learn more at valentix.io. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today on The Growth Shift, we're joined by Sharon Schanzer, the founder of RLD Group and What's Your Boulder. Sharon's career is a dynamic study in entrepreneurial evolution, spanning from the dot-com boom and bust in San Francisco to her current role leading two thriving businesses in New York City. As a self-described implementer and igniter, Sharon leverages her unique blend of deep creative, technical, and business expertise to help entrepreneurs and corporate refugees overcome obstacles and achieve their ambitious projects. Her insight into solo entrepreneurship, strategic problem solving, and the friction-free implementation of ideas offer a powerful blueprint for navigating the complexities of modern business. Sharon, welcome to The Growth Shift. It's great to have you on the show today. Now, Sharon, you have quite a vast perspective on technological revolution, starting from before the dot-com boom all the way through today's AI revolution. Can you share a little bit more about your background, the experience that you have, and really some of those biggest lessons you learned along the way that put you in the position to have such perspective on today's environment?
Relatively slow process. We didn't all of a sudden one day all have the internet, right? And still there are obviously people who don't. Fast forward to now where AI has really just shown up on our doorstep in an instant and has really impacted everyone's lives in every way. I mean, I don't really think there's anyone, even if they're not in, working in an AI related career or anything like that, has been impacted. And it's so sudden. And I think everyone has really been taken by surprise. And there's still the same resistance to change that a lot of people have. And then there's the feeling that you're being left behind, which makes, everyone sort of go into a mutual panic. So it feels like, especially if you live in a city where people are talking about this, that, and the other thing all the time, that everyone is ahead of you and everyone is involved in AI and so forth, which of course is not true. It's only a very tiny percent, like the 1%, as we like to say, right? It's the same one. It's not the same 1% as the billionaires, but it's really a small fraction of people who were lucky enough or whatever, interested enough to sort of get ahead of the game. And everyone else now has to play catch up, but that's not really what's true. 99% of people playing catch up. So it's been really interesting to watch everyone's sort of different takes. I teach a class now called AI FOMO NOMO. And it's really like, the idea is AI for dummies. I don't call it that, but that's because first of all, it's take. And second of all, it's not really what it is. It's for everybody who, once you feel like this electricity stuff seems kind of scary. What are these circuits that are coming through? Are they going to electrocute us? Are we going to die, et cetera? Obviously, this didn't happen. And, and that's part of, the human experience and the people who adapt, who are willing to try these new things are, usually. I just happen to be an early adopter. I've been watching Star Trek since I was a kid. So for me, all these new tools are like, yay, finally we have our tricorders.
Amazing. Now, Sharon, you mentioned something really important here, right? Resistance to change. And it's part of human nature, right? Although humans are extremely adaptable, and you put some people in some pretty extreme situations, they will figure out how to survive, right? And that's common across the board, wherever you are. But also the resistance to change is extremely common. Now, we'll get to talking about exactly what you're doing today with What's Your Boulder, but just to give the audience a little bit more insight there, you help people identify these obstacles and overcome them. In essence, resistance to change is an obstacle. And you have quite the perspective, given the number of revolutions that you've gone through and experienced. You've seen many people time and again show that resistance to change. So I've got two questions here for you. With what you've seen time and again when it comes to resistance to change, although it might be in our best interest and be extremely beneficial, why do you think that, first question is, why do you think that people are so resistant to change, even when they've seen that change leads to positive outcomes? And the second question there will be then, for those people who are a little bit more adaptive and a little bit more ready to change, the early adopters we could call them, what are some of the most obvious traits that those people have that allow them to go through times of change more readily? So I can go back to those questions if you need to, but I'll
Yeah,
leave
what
you
was
with
the
that.
first question?
So the question is, for people who are resistant to change,
Yeah.
why do you think people are so resistant, even though they know, because they have seen time and again, that change often leads to positive outcomes?
AI is like their main tool, for example, right? But if you just sort of say, I'm never going to use AI, it basically now will make you a Luddite, because even though yesterday that wasn't a tool that you needed to use and you're okay, there people still use flip phones. Well, that's great, but then you're left out. It's fine. I'm not like mocking someone for not wanting to use technology. On the other hand, it just kind of isolates you from the rest of the, we're talking about like the Western first world, type of things that people do. So it seems to me that people are just wired. And again, I'm going to do the symposium. And actually, the funny thing is that the symposium is going to cover three things: the resistance to change and why people do it, the overwhelm that comes with adopting new things. Like in my case, I'm an adopter, which means I'm working on the symposium with ChatGPT, and now I have to implement it. I'm overwhelmed with all the different things that I've told ChatGPT to help me do, but now I have to do them. So I have like a whole other problem of complete overwhelm, which tool to try and everything. And a third thing, I've always done them, and that's fine, except that the world will then move ahead without them. Eventually, most people sort of have no choice, and the world will continue and they will catch up. But to me, it just seems, some of it is just your personality. I'm interested in, not because I like Star Trek, but I'm interested in like what's going on. And I do like, I like science fiction, but not everything to do with change is about like, talking to your computer and things like that. There's lots of other things. And I just think people are afraid of the unknown as well. They just really don't know what to expect. And then I think the other thing is that from my experience when I worked in publishing, people were just really afraid of looking stupid, for lack of a better sort of more fabulous way to say it. And so they are rather stick with what they already know how to do, right? Which is whatever they've been doing. So if they've been using a typewriter to write their stories, they know how to use the typewriter, and that's that. But if they have to use a computer, and especially as you get into sort of a generational issue, people panic because they don't know how to use a computer and they're going to look stupid next to their peers. That's
I think you hit it right on the head there. It's that fear of the unknown. It's that fear of getting out of your comfort zone and maybe having people see you or view you. It's that self-perception of people will think I don't know what I'm doing, or I'll be outside of my comfort zone and people will see that I'm uncomfortable, right? So it's easy to stay in that zone of comfort and familiarity and not want to move without it. You've seen you've seen the real impact that adopting change can have for those people who might be early adopters or who might be more entrepreneurial or willing to get out of their comfort zone. From what you've seen in your experience, what are perhaps some of those key traits that people have that allow them, in your perspective, to move through new things and embrace change to get ahead?
I think general inquisitiveness. I'm personally an inquisitive person, so I like to travel, I like to read, I like to go to the movies, etc. So I'm always kind of exploring, what's new out there, and it's exciting to me to sort of be on the cusp of new. I'm not an early adopter by design. Like, for instance, I didn't say I'm going to be an early adopter because there are people who really, they thrive on that sort of specific idea. For me, it's just, this is cool, this is change. Of course, I like things the same, but I'm still like waiting for my jetpack. That's sort of my joke every New Year's. I'm like, okay, it's 2025. Okay, it's 2026. Where's my jetpack? So I think the common traits are just people that are, more interested in the world around them. They also, if you have ambition, obviously, if you're ambitious, whatever path you take, it helps to be interested in change, because if you're going to stick with the same thing all the time, potentially you're going to be stuck in a rut, whether that's a career rut, personal rut, and that kind of thing. So if you're looking for me, like, living moving to a different city or something like that is not terrifying. For other people, that's like the worst possible thing that they could ever imagine doing, because they like the way that the supermarket is to the left and the subway is to the right or whatever. It doesn't, to me, it makes me feel alive when there's change and when there's new things. And the other thing is, it just kind of keeps you young. I mean, learning new things. People have asked me my whole career, how do you know all these things? Because I said, well, I was around when they were invented, is how I know all these things. I started using them before you were born. So why is it that I should forget them along the way? So the more things you learn, the more, in the groove you are. It's interesting your everyday life is. And so I honestly don't really understand the sort of pathology of why people resist change, other than to say it is scary. I can totally understand why someone who is not as adaptable, can be terrified of the unknown. That makes sense. I don't like, I have my own fears. I don't really like heights that much. So you're not going to get me to the top of a tall building and tell me it's going to help you in your future career. I'm like, that's okay. I'm good. So everyone has their things that they're not comfortable with, but there's just so much exciting stuff. We're living in such an exciting time in terms of I know there's scariness too. I have a friend who shall remain nameless who said AI is the end of humanity. Okay. You know who you are when you watch this video. And of course, I understand. I think he genuinely means that. He really is terrified. And he's, by the way, he's a coder. He's not. And so he has his own perspective as to why maybe it was maybe hyperbolic, but he really is not happy about the AI agents that are embedded in his team and the fact that his team is getting smaller and all these kind of things. So I understand. And he is someone who doesn't really love change. So even though he's a technology person, so, everybody has their perspective of how it's going to impact them negatively. So for me, it's like, I have 48 hours in my day now because of AI, for example. Mm-hmm. And I have the internet, which is unbelievable and has been a powerful, force for change around the world. We can argue, good and bad. I definitely think there's both sides to that story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Change is coming rapidly, regardless of how you feel about it.
So fast.
But I think something that I want to pull out there is just that, you're saying from your perspective, you don't know why people are so resistant to change, right? But it's that, because for anyone, when I say you, if you believe and see things differently, it's hard to understand someone else with different beliefs at times as well, especially when things seem so revolutionary. So Sharon, through your own journey, you've learned a lot, right? You're inquisitive, you're ambitious. It's not only the two businesses that you have now, but you have had business in the past before coming to where you are today. Now, with your entrepreneurial experience and all of the lessons that you've learned through times of change and adaptation, adoption, what has been the biggest, most impactful growth shift that you've encountered along the way that's allowed you to become the person you are today?
Because I haven't really had like a specific plan. For some people, I'm a planner in other ways. Like I know what I'm doing this weekend, planner. I know what I'm doing this summer. People make fun of me because I know what I'm doing like for Christmas. So I am a planner, but for terms of my career, I've just sort of taken it in stride and I've just sort of followed my nose. So I had employees, was living in San Francisco, and then I had a baby who was not a baby anymore. And at the time I decided then also simultaneously to move back to New York City, where I'm from. They just put too many constraints on both my lifestyle in terms of wanting to be able to have the flexibility to travel or not work or whatever the case may be. And also, I really found that my personality, for better or worse, is very focused on making sure everyone around me is happy. I'm like happiness, I'm the happy keeper in chief. And I just decided that in my personal case, I needed to have my happiness and my son's happiness primary, and my employees would become secondary. And that just, I have some other version of that problem, which is that my clients rely solely on me. So when there's a problem, I don't have anyone I can effectively delegate the problem to. So I'm a web developer. I have websites I'm responsible for. If those sites go down, it's not like me calling Bob on a Saturday night and saying, Bob, fix this. I mean, I have resources I can use, but I am the person that is my client. All my clients need to rely on. It's a blessing and a curse, but it gives me flexibility. Stop if times are tough.
Yeah, no, it's an incredible trade-off, right? Because some people are sitting thinking, oh, well, I want a big business. The money is incredible, but with a big business comes, as you said, management and employees and a lot more stress at the end of the day. Whereas if it's, lifestyle and peace of mind that you're after, even with less income, you can find a lot more fulfillment and achievement just because you have more control at the end of the day.
I was
You can
able to
step
move to
back when you
France for
need to. Life has changed a lot for you since then, positively, of course. And today, that evolution is you're running two businesses yourself. You have RLD Group, which is a design studio. And what I'd like to talk a little bit more about is what's Your Boulder, your implementation studio. Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing today in business.
and my sort of superhero cape that I wear as a generalist, which by the way, I used to think was a bad thing. And now I've long since learned is a good thing, but it's still kind of coming into its own. Like people are still more now just sort of saying, hey, I'm a generalist, and be like, wow, that's really cool, as opposed to that's really bad. It's not good to only to know a lot of things. It's only good to know one thing. I'm like, who says who? So anyway, over time, as a generalist, as a person who's owned, a variety of businesses, and as a person who's helped a lot of people with their businesses, as is part of my design studio, I realized I had this other consulting business that basically just kind of appeared because I was already helping my clients do as a consultant. So they wouldn't come to me as typically a designer would just do a website or do a business card or whatever. In my case, it was always like, well, how do I, trademark my business, or how do I, take take um, take invoices with my business, or how do I grow my business, or how do I do my go-to-market strategy? Can you help me with your social media, my social media? Can you help me with my e-learning? I was like, sure, I can do all of those things. So that's clearly not the role of a typical graphic designer, right? And not only was I not operating as a typical graphic designer, but I always looked beyond even just sort of what was on the page. Like my clients, I have a client who I think I might have told you this or told the story once before, that says, one of my clients says, I wish everyone had a Sharon, which is just sort of, I have this autonomous, friction-free way of working. My clients like that about me. So it became evident to me that I needed to create a separate business, which was basically an offshoot. So I think some people call it a pivot. I go, anyway, do sort of do the work. But in my case, I'm almost always doing the work, whatever the work is. So the work could be, developing a website and then developing a business around that website. The work could be nothing to do with design or technology, which are my two sort of buckets that I know a lot about, because I am also sort of, I was talking yesterday about, should I call myself a general contractor? I mean, that's kind of what I am. We didn't decide. It's just a friend of mine. We were talking like if that's a good term for me, but that is sort of the closest definition so far, where people come to me, they have problems, they have businesses they want to start. Oftentimes, as you mentioned in my introduction, they are people who are coming from corporate who have great business ideas, the resources to start a business, but have no idea how to start a business. It's not easy. Even with all the tools that we have and all of the information we have on the internet, all of the things we have, with AI, it's not easy to start a business and have it be successful. Forget about even making it successful, even starting a business. There's a lot of, so what would happen in the past is people are like, I need a website. Well, what's the website for? Well, it's for this company. I sort of have this idea. Well, do you have a name? Do you have a URL? What's your business going and so on. So it kind of devolved or evolved from this sort of ask of I need a website to I really need someone to help me figure out how to run my business, how to create the business, how to evolve the business, how to hire people, which I've done recruiting, whatever. Bottom line is that I am sort of this generalist. And I purposely, what is called, but that's where the T is, right? So generalist, I have a lot of expertise in a lot of things. I'm the Jeopardy champion in chief, and I have deep expertise in marketing, design, and technology. But I also have the ability to find the resources, to employ the resources, to figure out what needs to get done and just get it done, thereby being everyone's Sharon.
So with over 2 decades in design and running RLD, you followed your nose, right? And you found yourself having a second business where you can apply not just the design consulting and actual work, but actually everything else that goes around the design to make it more effective as well. Now you're a generalist who helps people all across the board. Can you perhaps share a story with us to make this a little bit more tangible for the audience to understand how it is you actually come in and help people achieve this with such a broad perspective?
Sure. I was going to say something about being a generalist, but I forgot. So I have a client. This is actually kind of a funny story. So a client came to me, a prospective client in this case, and said, they posted on Facebook in this case that they needed someone to do an e-commerce site. They wanted a female who lived in the neighborhood that I live in Manhattan. That was the specific ask. I was like, okay, well, I'm those things. I happen to be a web developer. I happen to work in Shopify. I happen to be female, and I happen to live in the neighborhood. All good, right? So I met with the client, and their ask was pretty straightforward, like a Shopify site, not to diminish the amount of work that goes into doing Shopify, but it's a very narrow thing. It's not open source. It's just, you need a store, and you develop it in Shopify, which I work in, and there's, some parameters of what you can and cannot do. So a pretty straightforward exercise. So I met with them, and it turns out what they really needed was someone to develop and run and the entire business. They had just an idea for a business. The now client, has another business that's a brick and mortar business, and they want to be able to sell through the quote unquote simple Shopify site through their brick and mortar business, which I don't want to describe what it is because it's still a work in progress, but through their brick and mortar business for delivery in the local area. So they don't even want a website for the business. They want to be suppliers of the website, basically. And they have no idea. They didn't have a domain name. They don't have a website for their current business. They didn't have a name for the business, which turns out we're using the same name because it's a long story, but we are using the same name. They didn't have a URL. They don't have any idea of any go-to-market strategies. So in this case, they basically handed me a check and said, design the site, which includes all of the work for designing the site. So I've written all the content on all the photography, obviously developed the site. And now we're at the stage where the site is being launched. And now I have to do all the go-to-market strategy, do all the social, do all the print, whether it's print ads or postcards, designing delivery uniform. I'm designing delivery uniforms for the delivery drivers and delivery the signage for the trucks and so forth. So it's everything. The funny thing, I did think the funny story is that they said we need a Shopify developer. That was their ask. I mean, that is clearly not what they need. So it's a perfect example of how someone's like, hey, I always joke, I was like, hey, let's put on a show. Do you know that story from like old time movies? Like, let's put on a show. And all of a sudden they're like, putting on a show. It's like Judy Garland and her people are putting on a show. So it's not that simple to put on a show. You need a lot of people. So I'm able to, in this case, it's an interesting story also in terms of AI because they're paying me a fixed price. And so I'm motivated to do the work as quickly as possible, which is the opposite in some ways of the service industry dilemma that I talked about earlier, right? So for me, utilizing AI as much as quote unquote humanly possible, no pun intended, is in my best interest because if it takes me a second versus what it might have taken me 10 minutes before, I've earned more, as long as it's actually achieving the goal, which is the end game.
Sharon, an excellent example of how having deep expertise in one vertical allowed you to penetrate into acquiring a client, solving an initial problem, and then a broad set of expertise as a generalist to really make sure that once the client actually understood what they needed and wanted, you could deliver on that as well instead of sending them off to someone else at the end of the day.
I don't know what they would have done. I mean, they found the needle in a haystack with me, but I just don't understand what they were thinking. But anyway, my gain, obviously. So
yeah, what a way to acquire a client. Somebody posted on Facebook, and everything else kind of came together. Now, these are the ideal situations. Everyone just hopes that, hey, these fall in my lap, and it is a needle in a haystack situation for perhaps both parties.
Yeah.
But when we're looking at, client acquisition specifically as the fundamental and most important force in business growth, where are you finding the most success with client acquisition today to put yourself in the position where you can help more businesses just like this?
So I won't talk about the sort of design part of my business in terms of client acquisition because that's actually very straightforward. First of all, I've been doing it a long time. And second of all, I'm selling very specific things, WordPress, print, Shopify, et cetera. So I do get quite a lot of business on Facebook when people post, and they usually post, I am looking for you, basically. And I'm like, here I am, But that's a very specific, that's selling a widget. It's very straightforward. My background is in business development. And so I always joke when people say, what do you do for a living? I'm like, well, I do business development as my job. And then I get to do actually design work or implementation work for fun because, anyone who thinks otherwise when they own their own business is completely wrong. That's the number one takeaway is your entire job, when you're self-employed, whether you're a self-employed sort of solo or any kind of like simplistic sort of freelancer who does a very narrow thing, your entire job is to get business for yourself, okay? And I am lucky. I have to say I'm just lucky. My personality is such that getting business for myself has been relatively easy. And I use relatively in giant air quotes because nothing is easy. But I have, been in business a long time. However, to pivot to answer your question, consultative selling, which is selling a non-specific service, is much harder than selling a widget. Selling a widget, which is the design business, super easy. Selling, like when you work in a car showroom and someone comes in, I want to buy a BMW, your job is to sell them the most expensive BMW with the most number of, upgrades. And that's it. They've come into your store looking for what you're selling, okay? With consultative selling, you have to find the customer, and that is the hardest part. And you have to find a customer who at that moment in time, or as you, work with them over time, it's a very, very, very long process to cultivate relationships with prospective clients. So in the case of my design clients, when I get an opportunity, I usually close that within 24 hours. The person says, I need a website. 24 hours later, they've signed the contract, we have the check, I'm working. Consultative selling takes a long time. It can be a year, to actually close an opportunity, because you have to find the client, you have to work with the client has to be ready to pay, what is a substantial amount of money for anybody to work with you. And they have to be ready to give you, even though I work in a completely autonomous way, that doesn't mean I have like the possibility to like read their mind. I still need some amount of input, some amount of focus from the client to give me. I also know that if the event is free, which many of them are, I mean, I am busier than I could possibly be with going to events and that are free. I can leave if I don't like them. And if I paid for an event, we're less likely to leave. And just going out there and talking to as many people as you can. I'm also always in the process of workshopping, much, people don't know this, but I'm sort of, now they'll know because I told you on the webinar. I'm workshopping my messaging. People, when I hear that something, retro effectively or actively sell it in the same way that I sell my consulting business, I'm out there talking to people and I'm like, Sharon, stop talking about your design business. Or I forget to give out my business cards, which I am a big believer. I know I'm an outlier, but I'm telling you, people love getting business cards. Okay. No, people are always like fussing with their LinkedIn and trying to like connect on their phones and all that stuff. And I just hand someone my card. Women can't really do that. Then not go at all. So I will go, even if I'm not, and I'm pretty low key. I'm sort of dressed up for this, but I'm like a t-shirt and jeans kind of person. So I'll go to an event, even if I'm wearing, what I don't think would be like the ideal outfit or something like that. Just be out there. And I'm learning more and more about how to be. I haven't had to do this with my design business, but I'm trying to be narrower. It's really a lesson I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs know. If you try to sell all things to all people, despite the fact that it seems like you're going to make more deals that way, it's completely and empirically untrue, okay? There's lots of data to prove that it's untrue, but it's human nature to sort of say, I can do anything. Well, that doesn't help you sell. I'm coming back to that example, but it's so
you're
pointed.
completely right.
Yeah.
When you're selling, right, people are looking for a solution to one thing. They often have many other problems, but it's just the one pain that they have, the one thing they think they need or they know they need. But in reality, it's often a lot more complex than that. You need to sell one thing and then take a consultative selling approach to understand everything else around it, exactly like you did with the person looking for a Shopify store.
That was lucky because they came to me. I took a long time ago when I had a job at I don't remember where it was. I did a Miller Hyman class. They may still exist. I'm not sure if they do, but they talk about consultative selling. And it's really interesting to study consultative selling, values-based consulting, and really understand what your value is and how to sell in a consultative manner, really listening to what people are asking. So what I've learned recently, I have this tag, this company name, which is called Your Boulder, obviously. And that started out actually as a philosophy. It wasn't even intended to be my company name. I had this philosophy, which was more of not a personal philosophy, but I was going down this path of sort of speaking about it to groups and talking about people in a personal way. What is your boulder? How can you get past this boulder that you have? Of course, being that there's a boulder, when you move that boulder, there's another one behind it, but how these things weigh on you, like, not literally, but of course, physically feel like, oh, if I could just move this boulder, I could just finish this project. And people struggle with that. So it dawned on me one day. I literally was like, wait, that's the name of my company. And I had already trademarked. And I was like, perfect. It's trademarked and it's the name of my company and it's my philosophy. So what I've started to do recently, and this is where the workshopping comes in, I've started to ask people, rather than kind of like talk about all these different things that I can do, which is a lot of things. And it's confusing. People always say, how can you do so many things? I'm like, I don't know. Why is the sky blue? I can't explain how it is that I have this generalist. Other generalists get it, but most people are not like that. And most people don't have the years of tech experience, the years of design experience, and so on. So they just don't understand. And it's understandable that people don't understand. So I started saying to people, instead of like, I can do this, that, and the other thing, I can help people with anything that they need, which is like, well, what does that mean? I started asking people, what's your boulder? And immediately people will start telling me what their problems are in their business. And then I can say, wow, I can help you with that, which, 99 times out of 100 is something that I can help with. I mean, there are certainly examples of things that I wouldn't touch, but for the most part, I'm bringing resources to the table. So as long as I have the resources to do a project or do it myself, and I am a super connector, so I know people who can do anything, lots of people who can provide lots of services, or in a lot of cases, I can do the work myself. When I hear someone's boulder, I'm like, well, that's how I can help you with. So I've just really kind of flipped the whole approach on its head. Rather than sort of talk about what I can do for them, I let them tell me what they need me to do for them. And then it's more of a connect. So that's less of a needle in a haystack because everyone has a boulder. There's literally not one person, whether it's in their business or in their personal life. Now, not everybody has the resources or time and inclination to hire me to fix their problems or to solve their, to do the work for them. That's fine. That is the harder part because it's not a $10 project. If I was charging $10, I'd have 1 million clients, but I'd be very tired. So, whoops, sorry.
In client acquisition, it's identifying and helping your prospective lead identify what's that boulder, what's the biggest problem that they have. You can provide an immediate solution for, and through that, open up the door to other opportunities. Sharon, something that you mentioned that I think is extremely important for the audience is that, especially in today's AI-driven world, getting in the door for that initial conversation being one of the biggest challenges, you need to be thinking differently. You need to be doing things differently. And today it's getting in front of people, right? It's not sending out more emails or creating more pieces of content and telling people how great you are, but actually being able to get in front of them for a meaningful conversation. And in an AI-driven world, I think there is a bit of a reversal. People are seeking out those human interactions. In-person live events, especially the free ones, are a great place to go. Sharon, you mentioned previously how much you're using AI today in your workflow, in your business delivery, and how you're thinking about it as well. When we look at not just how you're using AI, but how AI is impacting the world today, you have a lot of experience, more so than many other people just entering business and really starting to get into technology now. From the experience that you have specifically in the .com boom and bust, what do you think are the key parallels and differences between the current AI revolution and the .com era, particularly regarding, the hype, the fear, and the long-term impact on business and entrepreneurship?
I think the parallels is that there's a lot of noise. And so, I can name, I'm not going to do it, but I could probably name in 10 seconds, like dozens of companies from the .com era, which now is 20 years ago, that no one has ever heard of and that don't exist. And at the time were the thing. Everyone was talking about, like March 1st was an example of an internet consultancy that was where everybody wanted to work. Have you heard of it?
No.
Probably not, right? And I lived in San Francisco. That was the holy grail. Everybody wanted to work at March 1st. So sorry, March 1st people, no one remembers anything about it at the time, etc. So of course, that is the same thing every time there is a revolution. Also, going back to the desktop publishing revolution, we used we used WordStar and Multimate. Those were the tools those are word processing tools. Now I'm dating myself, but no one's heard of those anymore, right? People hardly even use Excel anymore because everyone's using Google Sheets. So there's a lot of noise, and you just have to, even though as an early adopter, I like to try the tools, I also think it's really important to stay focused. Pick a lane. Mm-hmm. As I said, I'm teaching this class, AI FOMO, NOMO. And the main thing I found when people come to the class is that they feel like they should try all the tools. There's a million tools. Forget about the fact they don't have the time to try all the tools. Not all of them are free. And they also all do different things. And they're also in their infancy. So just pick one. Like Midjourney was the one I was working with most recently. It's still in its infancy. It still doesn't do exactly what I want. So why am I going to I do a lot of image generation, but maybe that's not the right tool. I'm not saying anything specifically about Midjourney being good or bad. I'm just saying it's infinite, the number of tools you could try. Everybody's trying to get in on the game. So it's more important to become literate in how AI, works, how it can impact you, how it can help you. Use a few tools. So when in my class, I list sort of the 10, it's a changing list, but like the 10 top tools that everyone's using. And these are the 3 that I think you should try and learn and use. Like I still use ChatGPT as my main AI tool, right? Because I know people like Gemini, I know people like Claude, but I'm comfortable using ChatGPT. And it's like the old game in town now. It's like, oh, ChatGPT, everyone's used that. Like that's so old fashioned at this point. Like it's not old fashioned. It's been around longer, which means it's the most mature, which by the way is a good thing. Like being around for a long time, not a bad thing. I personally would like to attest to that, And so, just pick a tool and get comfortable with it. Figure out how it can help you. If that tool doesn't work for you at this moment in time, for instance, like I wanted to explore Midjourney or Nano Banana for image generation. Try other tools, of course, but that doesn't mean you have to explore 100 tools simultaneously because you will never get to be an expert at anything. That's the opposite of I know I'm a generalist, but that's not how a generalist really works. A generalist doesn't become an expert in a million tools. A generalist has expertise in a lot of areas, but still knows certain tools really well. Like in my case, people ask me, will you do Wix or Squarespace? Just be the other thing.
Sharon, your story covers entrepreneurial resilience, strategic adaptation, and a very intentional pursuit of lifestyle entrepreneurship. For the founders, the coaches, and growth-minded listeners who are navigating their own growth shift right now, what's the single most important piece of advice that you'd leave them with about finding joy and intentionality in their entrepreneurial journey?
So I just think if you're going to go the hard path of being an entrepreneur and making sure that the bills are paid, which is totally different than getting a paycheck, make the most of it. Have fun, make opportunities for yourself, get out there, do in real life opportunities because you do not want to be isolated. I personally have no issues with doing, lots of Zoom calls and things like that. I've been working at home by myself, for a long time, and it's not something that bothers me, but a lot of people do better when they work at co-working spaces or go to events.
Sharon, thank you so much for sharing your story as well as your lessons with the audience today. For anyone out there listening who might like to continue the conversation or who even might just need a generalist for help, what would be the best way to
You're a
find you?
generalist. I have my cape. Okay, so the best way to reach me is my website, obviously. So it's whatsyourboulder.com. Right now it's a landing page, but hopefully maybe by the time this is live, it'll not be a landing page anymore. It's my boulder. Everyone has boulders, including me. And my email also is sharon@rldgroup.com. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn at Sharon Schanzer.
Thank you again for joining us today on The Growth Shift.
Thank you. It was great. Thanks so much.
Another powerful conversation on The Growth Shift. If you, like our guests, are ready to turn your expertise into a predictable, scalable growth engine, one that eliminates the grind of prospecting and enhances your high-value relationships, then it's time to connect with Valentix. We are not a marketing agency. We are your strategic growth partner, building intelligent systems that ensure your client acquisition is predictable, not dependent on chance. To see how our AI-powered frameworks can free up your time and fill your calendar with decision makers, visit valentix.io. Thank you for joining us on The Growth Shift. We'll see you next time.